Hi everyone. It's 2022 and I wanted to make a video dedicated to one of my favorite YouTubers of all time. And those of you who know her definitely know that she recently left the internet and quit YouTube, and I wanted to talk about it because she is one of the people on this platform that inspired me to create, inspired me in so many ways, and her leaving this platform really was tragic. And it really, I think, says a lot about what social media does and what it does to people who try and people who try to create. So, if you're not a fan of Lindsay Ellis and you don't know what happened, she's been on the internet for over 10 years, I think. She's been creating for a very long time. She had a really popular channel where she discussed TV, Disney, all sorts of takes. She defended trans people. She was a champion for queer rights, feminism. And she, I think, gave a really fresh perspective and helped found what is known as BreadTube or LeftTube. And I feel like I can't fully paint this picture of how important she was without explaining how, like, every friend of mine that I've reconnected with in the past year over quarantine and everything, we've been talking. It's like, do you watch Lindsay Ellis? And we're like, of course, the queen of YouTube, because she speaks for a lot of us, at least. It looked so glamorous. I literally thought to myself, how does she do it? How does she stay so strong? How does she stay so composed and eloquent? And with the post that she left, leaving the internet, and what she said about what being on the internet had done to her mental health, physical health, and just life, it was really haunting. And I, as somebody who is creating now, I feel like it would be a missed opportunity to not talk about what I think this means for places like YouTube. Because social media is Pandora's box. You've opened up Pandora's box, and it's created a lot of good and connection, but it's also created a lot of bad. And for people who create online, they tend to mostly experience the bad. And I think sometimes it requires a cognitive restructuring. Like, it's helped me to just remind myself how much more a good comment means than all the bad comments, because we all get them, you know? But it's a little bit different when you're someone like Lindsay Ellis, who had been creating for so long, and then she had basically an army of people waiting in the wings for her downfall. You know, and that happens with a lot of people. I mean, that happens with people who genuinely deserve it, in my opinion, you know? But in this case, I do not think she deserved it. I think Lindsay Ellis deserved better. I'm going to go to bat for Lindsay Ellis. She went to bat for an icon of LeftTube and a trans trailblazer, ContraPoints, and part of that online hate mob that was ready to get her at a moment's notice was accumulated because of that. You know, you don't go to bat for people online without making enemies, and she had made enemies from her early days because she was 4chan's enemy. Let's face it, we've all been posted to 4chan. Go ahead and post me, losers. You always do. Anyway, she had a cult following of people who hated her, but defending someone so publicly canceled like ContraPoints, I do believe, hurt her because it just added fuel to that fire. You know, like, I'm not going to say that she wouldn't have been canceled had she not, but it's kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And with the internet doesn't forget. There are people who have screenshots of sometimes doctored images, of sometimes images that are not representative of the problem or the situation. They're ready to ride the wave at a moment's notice to take someone down. If you go on Twitter and you see someone's name is trending, it's not because they've done a good thing. It's because Twitter has sent an army of people after that person that day. And I've been guilty of it. You know, J.K. Rowling's pain of being canceled by trans Twitter is real. It's not like she has the platform to say she's the victim of us, but she can suffer as a result of it, and she can claim that suffering. But it is ridiculous to think that a bunch of broke trans people on the internet have any way to hurt J.K. Rowling. But with Lindsay Ellis, it's different because she is not J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is a billionaire. And Lindsay Ellis is a perceived wealthy person, but she created online and she created jobs for people. She was part of a company, and she didn't post that frequently because she meticulously picked over her content and made her work represent who she was and what she felt and what she represented. And that is why she was controversial, because she wasn't afraid to take an issue from both sides. She wasn't afraid to talk about race or inequality or transness. All these issues that can get you canceled, she would talk about it all, because she bought the lie that I used to buy. That if you just explain yourself well enough, if you just present enough evidence, if you just articulate yourself, surely no reasonable person can disagree with you. But that lie is fed to young people like I was, who want to believe the world can be good. And I still do want to believe the world can be good, but you have to realize you can't change everyone's mind. With Lindsay Ellis, it became especially hard because she accumulated this cult following of hatred, and there's an inertia there. You know, with each cancellation or whatever, it becomes worse. The last thing she did that was still haunting her was just a comparison tweet. Yeah, I'll read it. This is what she tweeted on March 26, 2021. Also watched Raya and the Last Dragon, and I think we need to come up with a name for this genre that is basically Avatar: The Last Airbender reduxes. It's like half of all young adult fantasy published in the last few years anyway. Honestly, at first it reads like an innocuous tweet, but I can understand why people got mad about it. Because it, especially with coronavirus, there's been an upswing in anti-Asian violence, and it's really easy to spin this tweet as a message that's downplaying the success of an Asian team and Asian art. But what I think the core misunderstanding here is she is describing the genre as influenced by Avatar. And she acknowledges that by saying half of all young adult fantasy is like that. Because Avatar was so generation defining. But that's the thing. The internet doesn't have to take it the way you intend. They can take it the way they intend. So she tweets that, and suddenly Lindsay Ellis is part of an anti-Asian hate group. According to the internet, according to Twitter, she hates Asian people. She always has. And then they start publishing all of this transcript of everything in the past few years she did wrong, including defending ContraPoints. And it's a mess. It's an absolute mess, because it is a flurry of evidence, and the average Twitter user is going to see that and be like, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. Clearly she did some shitty things. But that is a manipulative way to take someone down, because it doesn't allow her to respond. It doesn't allow her to defend herself, unless she does. Lindsay Ellis released a video similar to ContraPoints, which, by the way, ContraPoints was able to effectively uncancel himself, at least in my eyes, with one video. And honestly, I thought Lindsay Ellis had done the same thing. Her video was full of research. It was heartfelt, empathizing with the people who were upset with her while also explaining where she came from. She told her story. She told about her history of abuse. She told about how she used that as a way to cope, and she did make some controversial things in the past that she tried to scrub off the internet. But of course, these people, you know, they gotta keep it. They gotta keep their hit list on you. By the way, blackmail, that's a shitty thing to do. And that's what the internet does. The internet does it to people, but it's that cult of mob mentality, you know. What Lindsay said in her goodbye message was really poignant, in that there is no accountability when a mob turns on people, but it is a public stoning, essentially, what we do now on social media. Everyone is so excited to see someone's downfall. I'm going to plug ContraPoints' video on envy here, because it is just such a masterpiece on what it means to envy. I mean, they don't use that word. That's what she says, you know. It's like we're afraid or allergic to that word, and it's true. People can't understand that the reason why they read this tweet by Lindsay Ellis and they assume she hates all Asian people and they go on a campaign against her is envy. There is no other thing. Because if you had watched her content, if you had been a fan of her, you would see that she is not advocating for hate against these people. And some people use that same argument about Dave Chappelle. And that's what I hate, because in my video I acknowledge that maybe Dave Chappelle thinks he's hating trans people. I'm not saying that Dave hates trans people, you know? But I am saying the way he's going about it is making people who hate trans people feel more vindicated and more assured that it's okay that they hate trans people. But anyway, people envy what? kind of influence she has, and maybe they resent her for a bad take, or she isn't afraid to call out your faves. She'll call out your fave movies, and she'll make thing good, but she'll also make thing bad content. And it was really interesting, and I'm so sad that we're not going to see any more of her channel, because it was my favorite channel on YouTube other than ContraPoints. Those are my two favorites. Sorry. Although Jessie Gender, she's third. She's coming in third. Anyway, I think it's really important to remember that this one tweet should not end a person's career. And everyone could say, well, no, Lindsay, your career didn't get ended. She had still had a lot of YouTube subs. She still had engagement on her videos. But it should be noticed that not only was her channel on the decline, but her health was on the decline. Her mental health was on the decline. She had wanted to leave YouTube already, but now she had to deal with an army of people that needed to be filtered out. She had somebody managing her comment sections, her social medias, and all of that weighs. It's not an asset to the brand to have your views go down, your interactions go down, and have all of the moderation go up on your content. And if you employ people, if what she was doing essentially was running a business, and her cancellation may not have canceled her, but it did kind of hamstring her. And I can see why, if your mental health starts to take a decline and your physical health, like hers did, you would have to just say, you know what, I'm leaving. And it's so sad, but I don't want to doom and gloom. I don't want to be, because a lot of people are saying, well, with Lindsay Ellis leaving YouTube, that is a bad sign. That makes me worried. And I don't want to do that, because this is a year of change for us. Lindsay has done a really good job creating and making content that not only reflects her truth, but also reflects what she wants the world to be. She's made books, she's made all these video essays, and they're still going to be there. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but this is the end of an era of YouTube. I think it's the end of authenticity. At least it kind of is. I mean, that's how I felt when Jenna Marbles left YouTube, and it's happening again. It is so hard to continue to create in this climate where most people are not interested in seeing someone succeed. They're only interested in seeing somebody tear someone down. And that's what's hard. That's what's hard. It's hard to see Lindsay Ellis leave, because I see a little bit of the fire get taken down with her, but I'm not going to let it stop me. All I can do is try. I think that YouTube ultimately has the potential to change, but it for a while has been changing for the worse. I'm hopeful with the reduction of public dislikes that maybe it'll get changed for the better, but somehow I don't think it will. The types of content that make money are the stuff that outrages people, and in turn, social media like Twitter is designed to get you outraged at people. Like, I've lived a lot of my life on the internet, and I wouldn't be surprised if somehow there is something on there that somewhere in the past, on my Tumblr, something, I'm sure somebody could use that against me. And I ask, why do people do it? It's envy. I'm not just going to talk about Lindsay Ellis. We're also going to read her goodbye message, because it was very sad. This was going to be a YouTube video, but I just don't have it in me to invite that kind of scrutiny. To be the last in the sick, sad line of YouTubers who get all weepy on camera and cry about how they just can't do this anymore. Boo-hoo-hoo. I had planned to move video content to Nebula, but I realize now that doing that is just keeping wounds wide open. My life ended 9 months ago. What has been taking up bandwidth ever since then has been a ghost. It's almost funny how many people will insist that I have lost nothing, because subscriber count is the only metric for success, and cancel culture doesn't exist. One YouTube channel chugging along on algorithmic inertia is not success. It's just an engine driving on fumes. And let me just say, I'm really sad that that's how she felt about her channel, because I still think that it had the potential to turn around, but I'm not going to tell her, I'm not going to tell her what to do. But I will say, she's not wrong that cancel culture does exist, but it's interesting how it's always the left that gets canceled. I mean, when was the last time you see someone on the right get canceled for a bad take? They will proudly scream that they are pro, racism, and people love it. You know why? Because the left are holding each other to a standard that they're not holding the right to. It's because they can't hold the right to that standard. So instead, we take out all this energy on each other. Trans people cannibalize themselves, queer people cannibalize themselves. And I'm not going to say that all do it, but online, the people who get attention are the people who are trying to do it. Like, when I first started my channel, there were so many trans people coming after me. Most people don't know this because I deleted all the comments, but about how I sounded like a man, I looked like a man, I was a bad example for young trans girls. That's what they told me. And I don't know what emotion it would have been other than envy, because they wanted to take me down. You know, you see the tallest flower in the garden is the one that falls over. It's the one that, for niche leftist creators especially, I mean, you are one bad tweet away from financial and lifelong ruin, and I just think that's dystopian as hell. 2021 has been the worst year of my life. I am traumatized by it. To this day, I still have people scolding me by how I handled it, that I should have handled it differently, that I should have controlled my stance, as if I had the capability to know what any of these people were even saying to strangers on Twitter while I was shitting blood for weeks on end. Okay. I just gotta say, I really hope she takes care of her physical health. Any of her fans being like, come back to YouTube, Lindsay, we miss you. They do not understand. Get help, Lindsay. We see you. The worst thing about this whole thing is that I can't even admit this trauma because of all the rhetorical devices people have already come up with to dismiss it. That centering my own pain is evidence of not listening. Does it occur to these people that you can listen and disagree with other people's conclusion? No, it doesn't occur to these people at all that other people have their right to feelings either. You are allowed to perform your feelings on social media, Lindsay, even if it's meant to even if it's meant to elicit sympathy. You deserve sympathy, and I will sympathize with you, Lindsay. Team Lindsay Ellis. Saying I'm weaponizing my fragile white womanhood or whatever to say that having thousands of people who you've never met hate you and say whatever will get them the most updoots is traumatizing. That people I used to know would sit there and lie about me on twitter.com to the tune of thousands of retweets and tens of thousands of likes. I just had to sit there and take it. My favorite are the people who dismiss any potential harm I might have incurred as justified because I am a wealthy white woman. I am not wealthy. While these same people's hearts positively bleed for Britney Spears. That is an irony. My favorite, look, Britney Spears deserves her freedom. Free Britney. We are so happy. But my favorite thing is the first thing she did was tweet about how much she loves Jeffree Star. And everyone's like, girl, read the proof. But you know what, you get a pass from me, Britney. These people don't see how similar these talking points are to the same boomer bootstrapped parenting style that I thought most of us had agreed was abusive. That you need to toughen up, accept your punishment, accept that even if the reaction was outsized, that you did something wrong. Because where there's smoke, there's fire. Grows thicker skin. Okay, I gotta say, the where there's smoke, there's fire argument is so awful because defamation exists, people. Nobody knows that Marie Antoinette never even said let them eat cake. That poor woman was a victim of a massive takedown campaign, and it was her story is a representative of the resentment of the aristocracy, you know? So it's not her fault that she became that figure that she is, but she did not say let them eat cake. She did not. That was defamation, and that's the thing. Where there's smoke, there sometimes isn't fire, people. These same people who always crow about believing victims, telling victims of public dog piles that they do not deserve to claim their trauma, let alone to process it because they deserved it. There is no such thing as cancel culture. There is no incentive reward structure in place like Twitter to call people out. There are no updoots, faves, follows, retweets for hotting a take on whoever is trending. Right? I reread the 2015 essay, Hot Allostatic Load, for the first time in years last night, and I could not stop crying. Even reading some of these passages now, I can't stop crying. This was written from the perspective of a trans femme and discusses some rhetorical devices used to demonize trans women specifically, which obviously does not apply to me. It does apply to me, but some of it is spot on. One of the most common tools of exclusion is through mobbing, which is rarely talked about because, unlike rape, murder, etc., it is not easy to pin it on a single person or scapegoat. Mobbing is emotional abuse practiced by a group of people, usually peers, over a good period of time through methods such as gaslighting, rumor mongering, and ostracism. It's most documented in workplace or academic environments, key points of capitalist tension, but is thoroughly institutionalized into feminist, queer, and radical spaces as well. Here's why it is horrible. It has an unusually strong power to damage the victim's relationship to society. This is true. You know, trans women are much more likely to go after other trans women on the internet. And do you know what happens when a trans woman gets canceled by a bunch of trans women and they're not somebody who's like Blair White who loves the negative attention? Sometimes they internalize all that negative attention and they kill themselves. And it is so awful because the most vulnerable people are the most likely ones to be harassed. It's the minority effect, and It's just awful because a regular privileged person might not be vulnerable enough to be bullied to suicide, but a trans person is. A queer person is. A shut-in is. Someone like Lindsay Ellis is. It can't be written off as an outlier, as some singular monster. It reveals a fundamental truth about people that makes it difficult to trust ever again. People become like aliens, like a pack of animals that can turn on you as soon as some mysterious pheromone shift marks you for death. It's true. I mean, it's like literally the Roman Colosseum. That's what social media is. We love to watch it. Everybody knows what happened when James Charles was canceled, and then he was canceled again. But that's the thing. James Charles had a public outcry of people who were getting on the bandwagon to hate him, but he was rich enough that it doesn't even matter. James Charles may have been canceled, but he's fine, you know? Because at the end of the day, it's all about classism. And I'm not just gonna say I'm not defending James Charles, but when it first came out, it looked like he had been unfairly targeted because there is a gay panic, there is a satanic panic, and looking back, it does kind of seem like he's just doing it. But whatever. I'm not going to talk about James Charles. The insidious nature of emotional abuse. How do you fight ostracism and rumors? They leave no bruises. They just starve you. Mobbing typically occurs in places where the victim is trapped by some need or obligation. Work, school, circle of friends. This can prolong exposure to damaging extremes. I'm convinced that the only reason why Lindsay Ellis has been on the internet as long as she has is because she makes money doing it. But it's sad because she's so good at it. And it's sad to know that she was probably miserable for so long. So if by some miracle Lindsay is watching this video, I hope she knows how much she changed YouTube and how much of a difference she made for people like us, for people like me. For these reasons, PTSD is almost an inevitable outcome of any protracted mobbing case. The Isabel Fall case is almost a textbook example of how online mobbing harms people and how the people who participate in these mobs never engage in any self-reflection. When some people read Fall's helicopter story and question the trans bona fides of the author in the early 2020, Twitter did what Twitter does and ruined Fall's life. Death by a million cuts. No one single person even beginning to question whether they did anything wrong by jumping to the worst possible faith interpretation of both the text and the author. After a profile written by Emily Vanderwerf was published late in 2021, were lessons learned about the way we use internet mobs to tear down people we don't know because of situations we don't understand? No. One of Fall's detractors, Neon Yang, became the new scapegoat du jour. Great name, by the way. Hashtag scapegoat du jour. Using some of the exact same tactics used in prior year to attack Fall. Yeah, I mean, it is a scapegoat du jour. That's exactly what it is. I'm not going to touch on Yang's original comments about Fall for the pushback to them, but what was downright charming in its lack of self-awareness about that whole situation was the way people used Fall's trauma to hurt Yang. The way they invoked Fall being checked into the hospital while Yang said whatever about Fall and helicopter story, all while having absolutely no idea what was going on in Yang's private life. What's particularly galling is how many people accused Yang of sending a trans person to the hospital with PTSD while apparently being completely oblivious to the fact that they could be very well doing the same thing to Yang, a non-binary trans person. But that's the thing, it's always a one-way street. People need to understand empathy is a two-way street. These parasocial relationships we have with people online has removed us from the consequences of our words. We need to understand that our words hurt people. Why do so many people wake up and choose violence? Why do so many people wake up and say, I want to hurt someone today, even if you envy them, even if they deserve it? Why? Why can't you just be nice? There was no lesson learned on the nature of mindless dogpiling, just Twitter doing what Twitter does, failing to examine systems of abuse while continuing to perpetuate them by laying into a new scapegoat. Scapegoat du jour. Again, a quote from Hot Allostatic Load. Feminist queer spaces are more willing to criticize people than abusive systems because they want to reserve the right to use those systems for their own purposes. At least attacking people can be politically viable, especially in a token system where you benefit directly by their absence, where your status as a good feminist is dependent on constantly rooting out evil. And I hate to say it, these people get clout, they get attention, and I'm guilty of it. I got clout for canceling Dave Chappelle. The only difference is that some people are lower-hanging fruit. And I believe canceling Lindsay Ellis is a much lower-hanging fruit than Dave Chappelle. Because Dave Chappelle is fine. When the bounty system calls for the ears of evil people, well, most people have a fucking ear. I just think it's important to realize that cancellation is almost at this point an inevitability of being on the internet. And it's not even always reserved for the people who deserve it. A lot of the people who do deserve cancellation do not get canceled. I'm sorry, but Eugenia Cooney deserves to be canceled. I'm going to say it because she has an army of young girls who watch her videos and aspire to be like her, and so she's endangering them. And I would say she deserves to be canceled. But she's not. And she's not going to be because she has such a huge fan base and she makes YouTube that munty hunty. Something else that was also inevitable. I was going to quit YouTube. I knew I couldn't do it forever and that I was running out of steam. That is why I'm sick of the increasing dehumanization inherent to YouTube. That I just didn't have anything to say about movies anymore. The plan was always to end with Love Never Dies, since it seemed like the best place to end, with some semblance of energy rather than keeping on until I withered away to nothing. What happened to me in March and April hastened it, but this was always inevitable. Which I will say, I appreciate her saying this, because without her saying this, this whole message would feel like a, this is why I left YouTube. But now it reads more like a, this is why I left YouTube now, instead of later. And at least that softens the blow. And I really do hope the best for her. My initial plan was to leave YouTube for Nebula, but I realize now that this is only entrenching myself more in a more intimate form of harm rather than a broad bug shot kind that YouTube invites. I won't go into detail, not right now anyway, but I can't do video content for them either. I can't make content, period. I just can't do this anymore. There is no healing as long as there is attachment to the thing that makes you suffer. And the thing in this case is being in the public eye at all. And I gotta say, it takes a lot of self-awareness and trauma and forgiveness for her to admit this publicly, I'm sure, because, you know, it's her job. And there's such a bootstraps mentality, but girl, that is wise. That is wise. If it's making you suffer, there is no healing in it. So heal. What I wanted was to quietly disappear, but since this is a platform where people are paying me to make content, I feel like I have to make a statement. If it were just me by myself, I would sign off and say goodbye, and that would be it. But I have a team who depends on my company for health insurance, and including dependents, I supply full benefits for 8 people. And here in the US, employer-based insurance is often the only feasible option. Saying to everyone, sorry about your children, but they can't have insurance anymore because Twitter makes me sad, just doesn't seem like a fair deal. None of them, incidentally, know that I'm posting this. That must be there must be a lot of guilt that creates, I gotta say. So the only thing I can do for now is keep this page active with the loose promise that someday I'll figure out something in the future to make up for this. While asking you to please stop messaging me, apologizing for not being able to subscribe anymore. You don't owe me anything. This Patreon is like my own life and career, just running on fumes. That is so sad, and I really hope she gets to a better place. I mean, I know self-destructive language when I see it, and that's exactly what this is, so I really hope she's in a better place mentally than when she wrote this, but I can see why she'd be in that headspace writing this. But, you know, I'm gonna send her good vibes. But all I know now is that being in the public eye at all is a losing game. She's kind of right, I'm not gonna lie. And she regrets all of it. I wish she didn't. I regret every time I've ever stood up for anyone. It always backfires. I regret every time I push back against something unjust. It was always just used to hurt me. I regret every time I ever stood up for myself. I'm sorry, that hurts to read. I never did it correctly. I regret every time I showed any vulnerability, just more ammunition to be used against me later. I regret every time I ever tried to play the game with peers and colleagues. They will drop you the second you aren't popular on Twitter anymore. It's all hollow and brittle. And if there's one thing I have learned this year, it is how eminently expendable I am. The good, progressive, cis, straight, white, wealthy men keep on trucking and coming out on top because deep down, they know that the systems they profess to stand against ultimately exist to benefit them. And to all the people telling me I need to grow a thicker skin or remove myself from the conversation altogether, you are right, and I don't have it in me to do the former, so I shall do the latter. I hope your new year is better than this. That is so sad. But you know, I respect her choice, and I'm not going to dwell on it much more. I feel like I've said all there is to say, but this is the end of an era for sure, and I am sad, but I hope that she finds peace and has peace with this decision. I've been following Lindsay since 2009. She's been my favorite creator for a really long time. I'm really going to miss watching her content. I hope she finds a way to heal. No one deserves this, least of all her. Exactly. I mean, no one deserves this. I'm not surprised that she leaving YouTube. I was surprised that she still made videos after initially leaving California years back around 2015. But that she's leaving in such an emotional and psychological shambles, regretting her entire career and everything that she's done that she feels contributed to it. It's horrible. The internet and social media destroyed this brilliant, witty woman because it never knows what to do with itself. I don't even have anything to say to that because that's exactly what happened. The internet destroyed this woman and it destroys people every day. I'm just so upset. Not that she's not making content anymore. I can accept that. But that a bunch of shithead ankle biters hurt her this badly and they're still convinced they did a good thing. I'm sad for her and furious about them. I am too. People think that this is justice, but it's not. I hope that we can find a way to rise above this sort of bullshit because nobody deserves this. I'm not going to dwell or read any other comments. I hope you have a good new year.